Dr. Imani Cole, a brilliant architect at the top of her game, yet constantly questioned about how she got there. Imagine being a black woman, having the vision, the credentials, the experience, but in a world where biases run deep, those achievements aren't always enough. This is Imani's reality. She's got the talent, but she finds her qualifications scrutinized at every turn, facing the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, prejudices of a biased system. Get ready for a powerful journey as we explore the hidden barriers in our professional lives and the courage it takes to overcome them. We'll see how one black woman's resilience in the face of constant doubt will affect not just her life, but her whole community. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments below where you're tuning in from today, and if this story of resilience and determination resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We have so much more to explore, and you don't want to miss the next part. Now, let's begin. The sun beat down on the newly constructed Harmony Heights Community Center. Its modern, sleek design a testament to Dr. Imani Cole's architectural brilliance. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was in full swing, a vibrant celebration filled with local dignitaries, proud community members, and the press. Imani stood tall, a confident smile playing on her lips, as she watched the culmination of years of hard work finally come to fruition. The building, a beacon of hope and progress, was not just a structure of steel and glass. It was a symbol of her dedication, her creativity, and her unwavering commitment to her community. Imani, in her late 30s, had always been driven by a profound desire to create spaces that not only served their function, but also inspired and uplifted those who used them. She was a visionary, known for her innovative designs and her commitment to sustainable and inclusive architecture. Her journey hadn't been easy, but she had consistently risen above the challenges, graduating at the top of her class from MIT, securing a prestigious fellowship, and making a name for herself in a male-dominated and often racially biased field. The Harmony Heights project had been particularly close to her heart. Growing up in a similar community, she understood the need for a central space that could offer resources, support, and a sense of belonging. The community center was designed with everyone in mind: a bright, airy space with a library, a daycare center, a seniors area, and various meeting rooms. Every detail, from the high ceilings to the use of natural light, reflected her meticulous planning and thoughtful approach to design. As the mayor began his speech, showering praise on the project and its architect, Imani couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The years of late nights, endless revisions, and pushing against the odds had all been worth it. The community center was a dream come true, not just for her but also for the countless residents who would now have a safe and inspiring place to learn, grow, and connect. The ceremony was a mix of excitement and chatter, the culmination of a long process. But as the mayor concluded his remarks and the crowds began to disperse, Imani found herself face to face with a group of local architects. It was a small group, mostly middle-aged white men. They walked up to her as a group and looked at her with a mix of curiosity and surprise. As they stood in front of her, she waited patiently for them to introduce themselves and to offer their congratulations. "Dr. Cole, we've been looking at your work. It is quite impressive," said one of them. A man named Mr. Thompson, who was known in the community as the most traditional architect in town. "I must say I had some doubts about the design, but it seems to be well built and functioning." "Good job," he said with a slight smirk on his face, crossing his arms while looking at Imani, almost as if he was studying her. Imani nodded, acknowledging his remark with a polite, "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. It was a pleasure designing this project and I am happy to see the community enjoying it." Another man, Mr. Harrison, stepped forward. "I was just wondering, Dr. Cole, you must be very proud of this. You know, it's not every day we see someone like you doing so well. I have to ask, where did you go to college? Did you go to one of the local schools?" He asked with a very curious look, not trying to hide his skepticism and probing questions. Imani felt a slight discomfort as she felt the tone of the conversation was heading in the wrong direction, but she smiled gently and replied, "I attended MIT." The men exchanged glances, and a barely perceptible frown appeared on Mr. Thompson's face. "Oh, MIT, that's a great school," he said. "Did you do your master's there as well?" he continued to ask. Imani nodded. "Yes, I completed my master's and doctorate at MIT, both focused on sustainable community architecture." Mr. Harrison's face turned into a slight smirk. "Impressive, very impressive," he said, but the tone of his voice didn't sound impressed, it sounded more incredulous. "It is not often we have someone so qualified, so well educated in our little town. I have to ask, what was your thesis topic, if you don't mind me asking?" He continued with his probing questions. Imani felt like she was in the middle of an interrogation, the excitement of the grand opening now replaced by unease. She had always encountered these types of questions throughout her life, but this time felt different. It felt more pointed and probing. "My thesis focused on the integration of cultural heritage and modern design in marginalized communities," she replied, keeping her voice steady. The group continued with their questions, asking her about her research, her professors, and her past projects. It was like they were trying to pick her apart, trying to find a crack in her qualifications. Imani, usually brimming with confidence, started to feel a sense of exhaustion. She had to constantly prove herself, not just through her work, but also through her credentials. It was an ongoing battle that she always seemed to face. As the questions kept coming, she realized that they were not going to stop, and that this group would never accept her for who she was. She felt as if the joy of the grand opening had been stolen from her, replaced by the constant questioning and underlying doubts that always seemed to follow her around. Even on her biggest day, she was not allowed to just be happy with her accomplishments. The day ended, and Imani left the community center with her shoulders slightly slumped. The grand opening had been a success, but the interaction with the other architects had left her feeling drained and frustrated. She knew that this wouldn't be the last time she'd have to defend her qualifications, but she was ready to keep fighting, keep designing, and keep changing the world, one building at a time. She knew, deep down, that her journey was not going to be easy, but she was going to continue proving them all wrong, showing them all what she was capable of doing, not just for her community, but also for herself. The weeks following the grand opening of the Harmony Heights Community Center were a whirlwind of positive feedback from the residents and accolades from local media. Imani's work was praised for its innovative design, functionality, and its commitment to sustainable practices. The center quickly became a hub of activity, hosting various events, workshops, and community gatherings. Imani watched with pride as the space she had poured her heart and soul into came to life, fulfilling its intended purpose. Yet, despite the public recognition, the subtle doubts and questions lingered in the background, like a persistent hum. They weren't always blatant or explicit, but they were there, present in the unspoken glances, the hesitant words, and the undercurrent of skepticism that seemed to follow her in professional circles. It was as if her accomplishments were always viewed through a lens of suspicion, as if she had to constantly justify her presence and her expertise. She noticed how her white male colleagues were given the benefit of the doubt, their ideas readily accepted, their qualifications taken at face value. For Imani, however, it was as if she had to over-explain, over-prove, and constantly defend her work to be taken seriously. The seemingly innocent questions she had to face made her question herself constantly. It started with small things. In meetings with other architects, her suggestions would be met with skepticism until a white colleague voiced a similar idea, at which point it was considered brilliant and innovative. During design reviews, her choices were dissected and scrutinized far more closely than those of her peers, with subtle comments questioning her expertise. She was often asked to provide detailed explanations and justifications for her decisions, while her white counterparts were given the space to be creative and conceptual without constant questioning. The microaggressions were everywhere, a constant reminder that she was being judged differently. During project discussions, some of her clients would often ask her about her experience with this type of design, even though her portfolio was as good, if not better, than any of her colleagues. She would then notice that they would then accept and blindly trust other architects that had similar experience than her, It was these subtle yet pointed questions that made her feel different and feel like she didn't belong. Even in her own firm, where she was a partner, the subtle biases crept in. She would be overlooked for lead roles on major projects, while less experienced white colleagues were given prime opportunities. Some of her business partners would insist on being part of her meetings with clients, just to make sure everything was aligned. Imani felt like they were trying to keep a close watch on her and were expecting her to fail. The constant questioning took its toll. Imani found herself second-guessing her decisions, double-checking her work, and expending extra energy trying to anticipate and counter the subtle doubts she faced. The joy she once felt in her work was slowly being replaced by a sense of exhaustion and frustration. She felt like she was spending more time trying to prove herself than she was actually designing. One day, during a routine project meeting, she presented a detailed proposal for a new community park. Her design was innovative, using sustainable materials and incorporating community feedback. She was excited to share her vision. But instead of engaging with her ideas, one of the senior partners, Mr. Davis, a white middle-aged man known for his traditional approach to architecture, asked, "Imani, are you sure you have the technical expertise to handle this type of project? It's quite complex, and we have to make sure that the person in charge knows what they are doing." Imani's breath hitched, trying not to show the anger she felt inside. She felt insulted, and her hard work was undermined by Mr. Davis' questioning. She was well aware of her skills, her experience, and her qualifications. She had always worked harder than anyone, and this type of questioning felt incredibly unfair and demoralizing. She felt like her capabilities were constantly doubted and questioned. It was a clear insinuation that she did not belong in her position. She looked around the meeting room and noticed that everyone was silent. No one was looking at her directly, as if they were embarrassed by the whole situation. The tension in the room was palpable. Imani took a deep breath and replied calmly, "Mr. Davis, I have a doctorate in sustainable community architecture. I have led numerous similar projects in the past, and I have received awards for my innovative designs. I am confident in my ability to handle this project, and I welcome any feedback you may have about my design. Is there anything else that you need to discuss that is relevant to the project?" The room fell silent. "Mr. Davis looked away, slightly embarrassed. The other partners looked down at their notes, avoiding eye contact. The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Imani felt a mix of anger and frustration. She had proven her point, but it had come at a cost. She felt more exhausted than before, and felt like she didn't want to spend any more time with people who were always questioning her capabilities. She wanted to focus on her work and create something meaningful for her community without having to constantly defend herself. As she left the office that day, she knew that she couldn't continue working in an environment where she was constantly questioned and doubted. She needed to find a way to reclaim her passion and her creativity without having to always defend her credentials. She knew she was at a breaking point. She knew something had to change. The incident with Mr. Davis in the project meeting was a turning point for Imani. The subtle doubts and microaggressions she had endured for so long had finally crystallized into a sharp, undeniable realization. She was being held to a different standard than her white colleagues, not because of her skills or competence, but because of her race. The constant questioning of her qualifications was not just annoying, it was a form of systemic bias that was undermining her career and her well-being. She began to notice a pattern in the way she was treated compared to her peers. She saw how her white colleagues were given opportunities to grow and take on new challenges without having to constantly justify their abilities. They were often promoted based on potential, while she felt she had to consistently demonstrate exceptional results before being considered for the same opportunities. It was like she was always required to overachieve, always having to work harder to prove her worth. The unfair questioning wasn't just limited to her workplace. She experienced it in professional networking events, conferences, and even casual interactions with other architects. It was as if she was always under a microscope, always having to defend her credentials and her expertise. She noticed that during these events, while her white colleagues would talk about their design ideas, she was repeatedly asked about her academic background, about where she studied, about her experience and the projects she had worked on. She felt like she had to give a presentation on her life and professional journey, almost like she wasn't allowed to participate as an architect, but only as an outsider with amazing qualifications. The constant questioning began to affect her confidence. She found herself becoming more hesitant in meetings, carefully choosing her words, and over-preparing for every presentation. She started to doubt her own judgment, wondering if the doubts others had about her were perhaps justified. She became more self-conscious, constantly scrutinizing her own actions and wondering if she was doing something wrong to make others question her qualifications. She would spend hours researching for her presentations, making sure every detail was correct. Every piece of evidence was in place, anticipating the doubts and questions that would come her way. She wanted to be prepared for the inevitable. The "tell me again about your experience," or the "where did you go to school?" question that always came when she presented. It was as if she had to always have her life and professional resume on standby. One day, she had a meeting with a potential new client, a large corporation looking to build a new headquarters in the city. Imani had spent days preparing a detailed proposal that showcased her innovative design concepts and her commitment to sustainable practices. She felt confident in her work, sure that she would be able to close the deal. During the meeting, the CEO of the corporation, a white middle-aged man named Mr. Thompson, was seemingly impressed by her design, but he kept circling back to her qualifications. "Dr. Cole, your portfolio is impressive, but we need to be sure we are working with the best. Can you tell me again, where did you get your degree? And how long have you been working on this type of project?" he asked, his tone sounding more dismissive than curious. Imani felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She had answered these questions numerous times. It was on her resume and on the documentation that she sent. She wondered why she had to constantly prove herself. "Mr. Thompson, as I stated before, I received my doctorate from MIT and have over 10 years of experience in sustainable architecture, but I am happy to go over my qualifications again if you need me to," she said, trying to stay calm. Mr. Thompson nodded. "Wes, I know, but you know how it is. There are many architects out there, so we have to make sure," he continued, still sounding doubtful of her abilities. "I must say, you do have great qualifications, but you don't look the part," he continued. Imani's hands tightened around her pen. She wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up and leave the room. She had had enough. The comment was not only unprofessional but also completely out of line. She understood that Mr. Thompson was trying to undermine her experience and qualifications, making her feel less than and incompetent because of her race. It was another subtle way of making her feel like she didn't belong. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice firm, "my work speaks for itself. If you have any concerns about my skills or experience, I suggest you look at my portfolio and talk to my previous clients. I am confident that you will find that I am more than capable of handling this project." The rest of the meeting was tense. Although Mr. Thompson did not say anything else about her credentials, Imani could feel that he was still doubtful of her abilities and was looking for excuses not to choose her to lead his company's new headquarters. She had tried her best to focus on the project and on her creative process, but the conversation made it hard for her to truly connect with her potential client. As she left the meeting, Imani felt a deep sense of frustration. She realized that no matter how qualified she was, no matter how hard she worked, she would always have to face these unfair questions. The constant need to defend her qualifications was not just exhausting, it was also incredibly insulting and demoralizing. She knew that she couldn't continue living like this. She needed to do something. She needed to find a way to break free from this cycle of doubt and reclaim her confidence. The meeting with Mr. Thompson was the last straw for Imani. The blatant questioning of her qualifications, coupled with the insulting remark about her not looking the part, had finally pushed her to her breaking point. She felt a mix of anger, frustration, and a deep sense of injustice. She had spent her entire life working hard, excelling in her field, and making a name for herself, only to have her accomplishments constantly undermined by the subtle and sometimes not so subtle biases of others. The constant need to defend her credentials, her experience, and her abilities had taken a toll on her mental and emotional well-being. She found herself questioning her choices, her career path, and even her own worth. The joy she once found in her work was now replaced by a sense of exhaustion and a growing resentment. She realized that she was not only fighting against external forces, but she was also battling her own internal doubts and insecurities, doubts that had been planted by the constant unfair questions she had to endure. Imani found herself isolating from her colleagues. She started avoiding professional events and meetings, as she couldn't stand to be interrogated about her background, credentials and qualifications. The events that had once been filled with excitement and joy were now places of anxiety and stress. She had to constantly brace herself for the inevitable questioning and scrutiny. She stopped engaging in casual conversation with her white colleagues, as she was afraid of being asked the same questions again. She started spending more time alone, at home, working on her own projects. She needed to reclaim her passion and creativity without having to always defend herself. She would find herself lost in her designs, trying to find solace in her art, the art she had loved all her life, the art that had led her to study architecture. She needed to feel the joy that her work once gave her, and the quiet solace she had in her mind while she designed her beautiful creations. One evening, while she was working late on a design, she found herself crying. She was tired of constantly having to prove herself. She was tired of the subtle biases, the microaggressions, and the unfair questioning. She felt like she was carrying a heavy burden, a weight that was slowly crushing her. She was tired of the constant fight. She looked at her reflection in her computer screen. A woman tired and exhausted. She asked herself, is this what my life is going to be? Is this what the future looks like? Will I have to continue spending my life fighting people who don't believe in me? She thought. She had to make a change. She couldn't continue to live like this. She was so exhausted from the constant questioning, and she knew that she had to find a way to break free from this cycle of doubt. She started to do some research, trying to understand the roots of the problem. She read books about systemic racism, watched documentaries about racial bias, and talked to other professionals of color who had experienced similar situations. She realized that she wasn't alone, and that the challenges she faced were part of a larger, systemic problem. She had to understand her enemy to be able to break free from the bias. She talked to her closest friends and family about what she was going through. She shared her experiences, her frustrations, and her growing feelings of hopelessness. She realized that she had been holding everything inside for too long. She needed to open up and let people in. She needed support. Her family and friends listened and offered her their support and encouragement. They told her that she was brilliant, capable, and worthy of all her accomplishments. They reminded her of all her hard work, the obstacles she had overcome, and the impact she had on her community. They encouraged her to keep fighting, to keep pushing forward, and to never let anyone dim her light. Her father, a retired professor, told her, "Imani, you are a force of nature. You are smart, capable, and an incredibly talented architect. You have everything you need to succeed. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. You have to stand up for what is right. You have to speak your truth, and you have to create a world that believes in people like you." He continued, "You are breaking new ground for many generations to come. You have to keep going. You have to endure." Imani took her father's words to heart. She realized that she couldn't let the unfair questioning and the biases of others define her. She was more than her qualifications. She was more than her race. She was a visionary, a creator, and a force for good. She had to reclaim her confidence, her passion, and her voice. She knew it was time to make a change. It was time to stop being a victim of bias, and it was time to stand up and take charge of her own destiny. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, Imani walked into her office with a newfound sense of determination. She had made a decision, and she was ready to execute her plan. She knew she couldn't continue working in an environment where her capabilities were constantly questioned and doubted. She was ready to make a change, a big change, that would not only impact her life, but also the lives of others. It was time to fight back. Imani entered her office that morning with a quiet but firm resolve. The exhaustion and self-doubt that had plagued her for weeks had been replaced by a sense of purpose. She knew she couldn't continue to fight this battle alone. She needed allies, people who understood her struggles and shared her vision for a more equitable future. Her first step was to reach out to a few close colleagues and friends, other professionals of color who had faced similar challenges in their careers. She scheduled a meeting, not knowing what to expect, but hopeful that they would feel the same that she did. She wanted to share her experiences and to learn from them. She wanted to create a safe space where they could all be open and honest about their struggles and where they could find the support and encouragement they all needed. The meeting was held after work, in a small, private space Imani had booked. When the attendees walked into the room, they each had a look of apprehension and curiosity in their faces. They knew Imani, they knew her well, but they couldn't imagine what had made her organized this meeting. She looked at each of their faces and smiled, and proceeded to start the meeting. As Imani started sharing her experiences, the subtle biases, the microaggressions, and the unfair questioning she had endured, she noticed a sense of understanding in their eyes. They had all experienced similar situations, from being overlooked for promotions to having their ideas dismissed and then stolen by their white colleagues. They shared stories of being constantly questioned about their qualifications, about their experience, and their abilities. They talked about the toll that it had taken on their mental and emotional health, the exhaustion, the frustration, and the sense of isolation they had all felt at one point or another. They talked about the ways they had tried to cope with the situation, the ways they had tried to protect their energy and their joy, and the challenges that they all faced. During their conversation, Imani realized that they were all incredibly talented, skilled, and accomplished professionals who were being held back by systemic biases. They were all being judged by a different standard. They were all being overlooked for opportunities because of their race and gender. She saw that they all had so much to offer, so much to contribute, and so much power if they chose to use it for the better good. Among the group was Sarah, a lawyer who had been fighting for civil rights for years. She shared her experience with discrimination in the legal profession, and she offered Imani some advice. "Imani," she said, "you have to use your voice. You have to speak your truth. You have to challenge the systems that are holding you back. You are not alone. We are here to support you." Another attendee was Marcus, an engineer who had experienced numerous microaggressions during his career. He told the group about how he had constantly been questioned about his abilities and how his ideas were often stolen by his white colleagues, with no acknowledgement of his contribution. He mentioned that he had been working on a support group for engineers who wanted to be advocates for diversity in the workplace, and he invited them all to join. As the meeting came to a close, Imani felt a sense of hope she had not felt for a long time. She was no longer alone in her fight. She had found allies, people who understood her struggles and were ready to join her in the battle for a more equitable and just future. They agreed to meet regularly to share their experiences, offer each other support, and strategize on how to challenge the systems that were holding them back. The group decided that they needed to do something to raise awareness about the issues they were facing and to advocate for change in their respective industries. They decided to start a campaign using social media and to share their stories and experiences. They started posting anonymously about their struggles, and they started using hashtags to raise awareness about the systemic issues they were facing. Imani started connecting with local organizations that were fighting for racial justice and equity. She was invited to speak at some local events and to share her story. She talked about the subtle biases, the microaggressions, and the unfair questioning she had endured, and she talked about the need for change. She encouraged people of color to share their experiences and to use their voice. She reached out to other architects of color and together they formed a coalition. They started to develop a mentorship program for young architects of color, providing them with the support and resources they needed to succeed. They started to host workshops and seminars on diversity and inclusion, offering training to firms and organizations that wanted to create a more equitable work environment. Imani started to realize that her struggle was bigger than herself and bigger than her own career. She was now a part of a larger movement for change, a movement that was fighting for the rights of all professionals of color. She realized that by standing up for herself, she was also standing up for others, and that together they could create a better future. The support and encouragement she was receiving from her allies gave her the strength and the courage to keep fighting. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that she was not alone. She had her allies, her friends, and her family behind her. She was ready to face the challenges and fight for the change she knew was possible. She was ready to take on the world. The coalition Imani formed with her allies began to gain momentum. Their social media campaign, More Than My Credentials, started to go viral, with professionals from all industries sharing their stories of being unfairly questioned, overlooked, and discriminated against. The hashtag became a rallying cry for people of color who were tired of having to constantly prove their worth. The mentorship program they launched quickly attracted dozens of aspiring architects of color, eager to learn from Imani and her peers. The program offered not only professional guidance, but also a safe space where young architects could feel seen, heard, and understood. They learned about the subtle biases they would encounter in the field and how to navigate them, and they also learned the importance of standing up for themselves and their communities. The workshops and seminars on diversity and inclusion were in high demand, with firms and organizations recognizing the need to create a more equitable work environment. Imani and her allies spoke to hundreds of business leaders about systemic racism, and they provided practical strategies for change. They urged companies to rethink their hiring practices, their performance reviews, and their promotion policies to create a space where everyone could thrive. Imani herself became a sought-after speaker, sharing her story and her vision for a more inclusive future. She spoke with passion and conviction, drawing from her own experiences and her determination to never let anyone undermine her worth. She talked about the challenges she had faced, the microaggressions, and the unfair questioning. And she also spoke about the power of resilience, the importance of community, and the need to fight for change. As her voice grew stronger, so did her confidence. She no longer felt the need to constantly defend her credentials, and she stopped second-guessing her decisions. She focused on her work, her designs, and her vision, and she let her creativity shine. She was finally able to reclaim the joy she once felt in her work. The positive changes also began to reflect in her firm. While not without resistance, Imani and her allies started pushing for changes in the way the company approached diversity and inclusion. She advocated for a blind review process for project proposals, where the reviewers wouldn't know the race or gender of the architect who submitted the proposal. She started mentoring young architects of color in her firm, providing them with the support and resources they needed to grow. Her firm started to implement new policies that promoted diversity and inclusion, and the workplace started to feel like a safer and more equitable environment. While the changes were not as fast as she would have liked, she was able to see the shift in the culture of the firm, and it gave her a sense of hope that they would continue to grow. One day, Imani received an email from the CEO of the corporation, Mr. Thompson, the same CEO who had questioned her credentials and made the insulting comment about her not looking the part. He requested another meeting to discuss her proposal for the new headquarters, stating that he and his team were now ready to revisit her proposal. Imani felt a sense of calm and power, but she was not sure if she wanted to accept the meeting request. She decided to talk to her allies to seek their support and advice before accepting the offer. During the meeting, her allies advised her to accept, but not to let him undermine her again. They said that it was her chance to show Mr. Thompson what she was capable of doing, and to show him that her qualifications were more than enough to create the headquarters he wanted. They said that it was time for her to use her voice to create real change, and to make sure that other architects of color would never have to go through the same that she did. Imani agreed. She accepted the meeting request, but on her own terms. She clearly stated that she would only discuss her project proposal and not her qualifications, experience, or background. She told Mr. Thompson that if he had any doubts about her capabilities, he should look at her portfolio, her website, and talk to her previous clients, but that there was no need for her to constantly defend her qualifications as her work spoke for itself. Mr. Thompson agreed. During the meeting, he focused on the details of her proposal and his team asked questions about the project. They discussed the different options and the possibilities for the design, and Mr. Thompson did not once question her capabilities. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Thompson thanked Imani for her time and asked for an official proposal that his team could review and consider. He also apologized for his previous comments and his questioning about her background. He told her that he had learned a lot about systemic racism and that he wanted to be a part of creating a more inclusive and equitable future. Imani accepted his apology, but she also made it clear that actions speak louder than words. She told him that it was his responsibility to take action and to create a workplace where everyone had the opportunity to thrive, no matter their race, gender, or background. A few weeks later, Imani received a phone call from Mr. Thompson. He had chosen her firm to lead the design of the new corporate headquarters. Imani smiled, knowing that her hard work, her perseverance, and her dedication had finally paid off. She knew that she still had much work ahead, but she also knew that she was finally on the right path. She was finally making a change. The construction of the new corporate headquarters, led by Imani and her team, became a landmark project, not just for its innovative design and sustainable practices, but also for its commitment to diversity and inclusion. Imani insisted that the project prioritize hiring people of color, women, and members of other marginalized communities, ensuring that the entire team reflected the diversity of the community it was built in. The success of the headquarters project brought Imani and her coalition even more recognition. They continued to expand their mentorship program, reaching more aspiring architects of color, and they continued to advocate for policy changes that would create a more equitable professional landscape. They became a symbol of hope and progress, and their work inspired other industries to take action and create real change. Imani's firm also transformed into a beacon of diversity and inclusion. They implemented a blind review process for project proposals, promoted equal pay for equal work, and created mentorship opportunities for all employees, regardless of their race, gender, or background. The firm became known for its commitment to social justice, and it attracted top talent from all over the world. Imani herself continued to grow as a leader, a visionary, and an advocate for change. She won numerous awards for her work, not just for her designs but also for her commitment to social justice. She used her platform to inspire others, sharing her story and her message of hope. She became a mentor for many and a role model for countless young architects of color. She often reflected on her journey, remembering the days when she was constantly questioned and doubted. She had come a long way since then, and she knew that the challenges she had faced had made her stronger and more resilient. She had learned the importance of standing up for herself, using her voice, and fighting for what was right. One day, a young architect of color approached Imani after one of her speaking engagements. The young architect was eager to start her career, but she was also worried about facing the same biases and challenges that Imani had. Cole, the young architect asked, her voice full of apprehension, "How did you do it? How did you overcome all those obstacles and still succeed? I am so scared to face the same discrimination you did. Will it always be this hard?" Well, Imani smiled gently, remembering the countless times she had felt the same way. "It wasn't easy, and it won't always be," she replied. "But you have to remember that you are more than your credentials. You are more than your race. You are more than the doubts others may have about you. You are talented, you are capable, and you are worthy of every success that comes your way." As she continued, "You will face biases, you will face unfair questions, and you will encounter people who will try to dim your light, but you have to keep your head high. You have to know your worth, you have to use your voice, and you have to fight for what you believe in. And you will never have to do this alone." As she gestured to the room where other professionals of color were chatting and laughing, "Look around you, you are not alone. We have created a network of allies who will support you, who will encourage you, and who will fight alongside you. We are building a future where everyone, regardless of their background, will have the opportunity to thrive." Imani's journey became a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of community, and the need to challenge the systems that hold people back. Her story inspired countless individuals and organizations to take action and create a more just and equitable world. She had not only overcome the unfair questioning of her credentials, but she had also used her experience to make sure that others would never have to endure the same challenges. The Harmony Heights Community Center, the project that had marked the beginning of her journey, continued to be a symbol of hope and progress. It became a place where people of all backgrounds could come together, learn, grow, and thrive, a place that reflected Imani's values and her dedication to community and justice. Imani continued her work as an architect, her designs now carrying a deeper meaning and a more profound sense of purpose. She created spaces that were not only beautiful and functional, but also inclusive and equitable. She left behind a legacy that would inspire generations to come, a legacy built on her talent, her determination, and her unwavering commitment to justice. She had not only created buildings, she had also created a movement that was transforming the world, one building at a time. So, what did you think of Imani's journey? A powerful reminder that racism isn't just overt hate, but often subtle biases that undermine our confidence. Her story shows us the importance of using our voice, building community, and challenging systems that hold people back. It calls on us to be allies and to create a more equitable world for everyone. What resonated most with you? Let us know in the comments. If you were moved by Imani's resilience, please like and share this video, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this, so that you don't miss out on our next episode. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you in the next video.